The wind started talking at 3:47 in the afternoon, not howling, not whistling, talking. It was a low, grinding sound that felt like it came from everywhere at once. It moved through the frozen ground, climbed up through the soles of Elijah Thorne's boots, and settled deep in his chest. He stopped walking and stood still, breath tight, eyes fixed on the trees. He had lived in the Blue Ridge Mountains his whole life, but he had never felt the land speak like this before. Neither had anyone else. Then someone screamed a single word, a word that erased every other thought: tornado. In December, in the mountains, in cold that was never supposed to allow such a thing to exist. Elijah looked west and saw the sky turn the color of a bruise. A dark spinning column dropped from the clouds and touched the earth 3 miles away. It was moving fast, too fast, faster than fear could form properly. Elijah ran, not toward the church, not toward the trading post. He ran toward his round cabin. Behind him, he heard his neighbors running too. They ran toward their square cabins, their normal cabins, cabins with corners and flat walls and peaked roofs that had always been good enough, cabins built the way everyone had always built them. In 60 seconds, those cabins would be kindling. 4 months earlier, in September of 1894, the laughter had started at the trading post. Boys building a barrel. Samuel Crawford said, loud enough for everyone to hear, loud enough for Elijah to hear too. Crawford had been building square cabins for 40 years. He had thick hands and a voice that carried. When he spoke, people listened, even if they did not agree. Not a barrel, Jacob Hendrick said, squinting across the clearing. Barrels got flat ends. That thing's round all the way through. Crawford laughed. Then it's a silo with a door. The men laughed with him. A grain storage building, Crawford continued, and the fool plans to live in it. Even Father William smiled, though he usually stayed above such things. Elijah heard every word. He kept working. He bent another steamed log slowly into place, hands burning, arms shaking. That was the hardest part, the bending. Square cabins used straight logs because straight logs were easy. You cut them, you stacked them, you notched the corners. Done. Round walls were different. Round walls needed patience. They needed steam. They needed an understanding of how wood grain moved under pressure. Most builders never bothered to learn that. Elijah had. He had spent 3 weeks building a steam box by himself, a long wooden chamber where logs could be heated until they softened. When they came out, they could be bent around a circular frame and left to cool into their new shape. Why? Thomas Reed asked one afternoon. Reed was standing nearby, watching Elijah wrestle another curved log into place. He was not laughing. He was curious, which made him different. Why go through all this trouble? Reed asked. Straight walls work just fine. Elijah wiped sweat from his face, even though the air was cold. You ever watch water move around a river stone? He asked. Sure. It doesn't stop, doesn't pile up. It just goes around smooth. He pressed the log into position. Wind does the same thing. Flat walls give it something to push against. Corners give it something to grab. Round walls don't. Reed frowned. We don't get wind like that up here. Not yet, Elijah said. Reed laughed and walked away, but he glanced back at the sky before he did. By October, the cabin was half finished, and the settlement had turned it into a joke. They called it the drum, the cheese wheel, the pregnant silo. Only old Martha Briggs did not laugh. She walked around the structure slowly one afternoon, fingers tracing the curved logs. Looks like the round houses my grandmother talked about, she said. Elijah looked up from his work. Your grandmother? She was from Ireland. Said the old people built round so storms could not tear their homes apart. She smiled softly. Also said fairies could not hide in corners. Elijah smiled back. I think the real reason is simpler, Martha said. Round things last. Square things break. She visited often after that. She asked questions that showed she understood more than most of the men who mocked the cabin. On her last visit before winter, she brought a small iron charm shaped like a circle. My grandmother's, she said, for luck. I don't believe in luck, Elijah said. "I know," Martha replied. "You believe in geometry." The door took the longest. Square doors were easy, straight cuts, right angles, hinges on flat wood. A round door needed perfect curves, a frame that bent without breaking, hinges that moved smoothly on a curved surface. Elijah failed 4 times. On the 5th, it worked. "Why round?" Reed asked again, watching him hang it. "A square door breaks the curve," Elijah said, "creates a weak spot. For weather that doesn't happen here, not yet." November came with snow. Everyone prepared for winter, except Elijah. While others stacked wood and filled pantries, he was still adjusting curves and sealing joints. His woodpile stayed small. His food store stayed light. "He'll freeze," Crawford said. "That thing will never hold heat." But it did. By December 1st, Elijah's cabin stayed warm with half the firewood his neighbors used. No corners meant no cold pockets. Heat moved in smooth circles, spreading evenly from the central fire pit. Elijah said nothing. December 14th started wrong. The air felt heavy. The birds were silent. The sky turned green in a way Elijah had only seen in books. At the trading post, the men noticed too. "Wrong color," Crawford muttered. Father Williams closed his Bible and stared west. "My grandfather spoke of a storm like this," he said. At 3:47, the wind began to talk. The tornado touched down 3 miles away and came straight for the settlement. Elijah ran. Behind him, the world broke apart. Square walls caught the wind. Corners multiplied the force. Roofs lifted. Logs flew. Cabins exploded into spinning debris. Elijah reached his round door and fell inside. The sound was beyond anything human. The wind screamed around the curved walls, sliding past without finding purchase. The cabin shook but did not break. 47 seconds passed. Then silence. Elijah opened the door. Everything was gone. Everything except the round cabin. Crawford staggered toward it, blood on his face, eyes wide. "How?" he whispered. Elijah touched the curved wall. "No corners," he said. That night, 23 people slept inside the round cabin. Outside, the cold fell to 15 below. Inside, it stayed warm. And nothing in the settlement would ever be built the same again. Morning came slowly after the storm. Not with birds or light, but with silence. Elijah woke before anyone else. The fire had burned low, but the cabin still held its warmth. Bodies were pressed close together on the floor, people breathing softly, some whispering in their sleep, others crying without sound. Fear had exhausted them. He stood carefully and opened the round door. Cold air rushed in. The world outside looked wrong. The forest was shaved down to stumps. Snow was gone, scraped away to bare earth. Trees lay twisted like broken bones, all pointing the same direction, as if the land itself had been dragged west. There were no cabins, not damaged, not leaning, gone. Elijah stepped out and felt his knees weaken. He leaned against the curved wall and forced himself to stay upright. He counted the places where homes had stood. Crawford's place, Reed's, the mill house, the church, nothing. Behind him, the survivors began to wake. Someone gasped. Someone screamed. Someone dropped to their knees. Crawford came out last. He stood beside Elijah, staring at the empty ground where his cabin had been for 4 decades. "I built that with my hands," he said quietly. "Every log, every joint." Elijah said nothing. "They laughed with me," Crawford went on. "I led it. I made it easy for them." His voice broke. By midday, they had found the dead. Some bodies were uncovered by the wind. Others would never be found. They counted 11. Men and women who had trusted walls and corners and roofs that had always worked before. Father Williams prayed over them using a Bible pulled from the wreckage of the root cellar. His voice shook, but he did not stop. That afternoon, the question began to spread, not spoken loudly. Not at first. Why did that cabin live? People walked around Elijah's home in silence. They touched the walls. They knocked on the curved logs. They stared at the round door like it might open by itself and explain everything. That night, they slept there again. The second night, too, there was nowhere else to go. On the third day, Crawford came with an axe and a saw. "I want you to teach me," he said. Elijah looked at him. "I want to build one," Crawford added, "just like this." Some of the men scoffed, quietly. Old habits did not die fast. "Ain't natural," someone muttered. Crawford turned on him. "Neither is burying neighbors." No one argued after that. They started with the steam box. Elijah showed them how to build it long and tight so the heat stayed even. He explained how to read the grain in the wood, how to know when a log would bend and when it would snap. Most of them failed at first. Logs cracked, frames slipped, steam burned hands. Elijah failed with them. He showed them his old broken pieces stacked behind the cabin, proof that this was not magic. It was work. By spring, Crawford's cabin began to take shape. Round, slow, careful. People came from nearby settlements to see it. Survivors told the story again and again, about the green sky, about the roar, about the only structure left standing. Some listened, some laughed, a few stayed. They helped bend logs. They asked questions. They took notes. Martha Briggs came every day, wrapped in a blanket, sitting on a stool near the steam box. "People forget," she said once, "then storms remind them." Crawford's cabin took 3 times longer than any square one he had ever built. When it was finished, he stood inside it alone for a long time. Then he came out with wet eyes. "Worth every hour," he said. Thomas Reed built the next one, smaller, tighter, perfectly shaped. Others followed, not everyone. Some men refused. They rebuilt square. They said the storm was a freak, said it would never happen again. Elijah did not argue. He only said, "Not yet." By summer, 4 round cabins stood where the tornado path had cut clean through the land. By winter, they faced another test. The cold came early and hard. Temperatures dropped lower than anyone remembered. Square cabins burned through wood at a frightening rate. Chimneys cracked. Corners froze. The round cabins stayed warm. Heat moved in circles. Fires burned low. Wood piles lasted. People noticed. Word spread farther this time. Men from Tennessee came. Then from Virginia valleys, they brought questions, skepticism, and sometimes pride that had to be broken before learning could begin. Elijah taught all who stayed. He charged nothing. "Lives cost enough," he said. Years passed. The story of the December tornado became a lesson instead of a warning. Parents told it to children. Builders spoke of it in hushed tones. Corners became something people thought about. By the time university men arrived with notebooks and rulers, Elijah was no longer surprised. They measured. They calculated. They used long words. Elijah listened politely. "You built this without formal training?" one professor said in disbelief. Elijah shook his head. "I was trained, just not by you." He pointed to the hills, to the stones in the creek, to the memory of a storm that had spoken before it killed. The professor wrote that down, but the real proof stood behind them. Round walls, no corners, still standing, and the wind, when it came again, had nothing left to grab. The second tornado came 8 years later, not as strong, not as wide, but strong enough to remind people. This time, there was no laughter. When the sky shifted and the air turned heavy, families did not run for the church. They did not pray for their square walls to hold. They ran for curves, for smooth wood, for doors without corners. Every round cabin stood, every one. After that, no one argued anymore. By 1905, the settlement no longer looked like it once had. From above, it would have seemed strange. Circles scattered among fields and trees, smoke rising straight from central roofs, paths bending naturally around homes instead of cutting sharp lines. Square cabins still existed, but fewer each year, not because Elijah demanded it, not because of laws, because people remembered. They remembered 11 graves. They remembered a green sky, They remembered sound that felt alive. Crawford became Elijah's closest partner. The man who once laughed the loudest now corrected others when they rushed the work. You can't force a curve, he'd say. You earn it. Thomas Reed taught apprentices how to shape hinges that followed the wall instead of fighting it. He said the door was the soul of the structure. If the door respected the curve, the rest would follow. Martha Briggs lived long enough to see 12 round cabins standing where only one had once been mocked. On her last day, she asked Elijah to open the round door and let the wind move through the cabin. It still knows, she said softly. The wind remembers who listens. She died smiling. Elijah kept building. He traveled across the mountains, sometimes on foot, sometimes by wagon. People sent letters asking for help after storms tore apart their towns. He came quietly. He worked slowly. He taught patiently. He never raised his voice, never mocked anyone. He only told the story when asked. About a boy with books. About neighbors who laughed. About corners that failed. Engineers came later. They brought numbers and diagrams. They explained forces and pressure and flow. They confirmed what Elijah already knew. Curves spread force. Corners concentrated. Nature always chooses the path that lasts. Elijah nodded and kept working. By the time he turned 60, his hands were stiff. Steam burned slower. Logs bent harder. But his apprentices were strong, and they carried the knowledge forward. When Elijah died in 1952, they buried him on a small rise near his first cabin. The round one, it still stood. The logs had turned silver. The roof had been replaced twice. The door had been rebuilt more times than anyone remembered. But the walls were the same. Visitors still came. They walked around it. They touched the curve. They asked the same question. Why is it round? The answer was simple. Because corners give the wind something to fight. And wind given something to fight will always win. But the longer answer lived in the walls. In the memory of a December afternoon when the wind spoke. In 47 seconds that changed a settlement forever. In a boy who believed that survival was not about strength but shape. And in a round door that opened when every square one failed.